Welcome, seekers, to the Baron's Chest. Today we're diving into one of history's strangest and most baffling battles, the War on Coffee. Yes, you heard that right. There was a time when people actually tried to ban coffee, and not just once. Across different countries and eras, rulers and religious leaders feared coffee houses, the drink itself, and most dangerously, the conversations that came with it. So what led to this anti-coffee hysteria? And why did some rulers see a simple cup of coffee as a threat to society? Let's find out. Our first coffee war takes us back to the Ottoman Empire, where coffee was seen as a delicious but potentially treasonous beverage. Coffee arrived in the Islamic world around the 15th century, introduced by traders from Ethiopia and Yemen. It quickly became wildly popular, especially in coffee houses where people gathered to talk, debate, and exchange ideas. Sultan Murad IV, who ruled from 1623 to 1640, saw this as a serious problem. Why? Because people weren't just drinking coffee, they were discussing politics, religion, and government policies. Fearing rebellion, Murad IV outlawed coffee along with alcohol and tobacco. And this wasn't just a slap-on-the-wrist ban. Breaking the coffee law could get you executed. Some sources claim that Murad personally patrolled the streets of Istanbul in disguise, beheading coffee drinkers on the spot. A bit of an overreaction, don't you think? Spoiler alert. The ban didn't last. Coffee was just too good, and once Murad was gone, people went back to their coffee-loving ways. Now you might be thinking, okay, maybe an authoritarian sultan banning coffee makes sense. But surely the church wasn't afraid of a morning pick-me-up? Oh, but they were. In the early 1600s, coffee had spread across Europe, and it terrified religious leaders. Many Catholic priests called it the devil's drink, believing that anything so addictive and stimulating must be the work of Satan. Some even argued that drinking coffee was a gateway to sin, much like alcohol. But coffee had an unexpected defender, Pope Clement VIII. Instead of banning it outright, he decided to try it for himself. After taking a sip, he reportedly said, "This devil's drink is so delicious that it would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of it." And just like that, coffee was officially blessed instead of banned. If you think caffeine-fueled protests are a modern thing, let me introduce you to Sweden in the 1700s. King Gustav III absolutely hated coffee. He saw it as an unhealthy, unnecessary foreign influence and believed it was corrupting Swedish society. In 1746, he heavily taxed coffee drinkers and banned coffee houses, but Swedes refused to give up their brew. To prove coffee was dangerous, Gustav conducted a bizarre medical experiment. He found two prisoners sentenced to death and forced one to drink coffee every day, and the other to drink tea. The result? The tea drinker died first. The coffee drinker lived longer than everyone else. Despite the experiment backfiring, Sweden kept fighting coffee for decades, until of course they gave up and embraced caffeine like the rest of the world. Next, we head to Prussia, where King Frederick the Great had a personal vendetta against coffee. He was convinced that beer was the superior drink and thought coffee was weakening his army and making people lazy. In 1777, he issued a manifesto stating, "Beer is the king's drink, coffee is inferior." Imagine a king personally declaring war on your morning routine. He even hired smellers, government officials tasked with sniffing out illegal coffee roasters in the streets. As you can probably guess, the coffee-loving public ignored him completely. The US actually had a coffee rebellion of its own, but in a very different way. Before the Boston Tea Party in 1773, Americans were mostly tea drinkers. Thanks, Britain. But after dumping British tea into the harbor, drinking coffee became a patriotic act. Even after the Revolution, coffee remained a symbol of American independence, and by the 1800s it was the country's favorite drink. No bans, no riots, just a good old-fashioned caffeine-fueled revolution. In the end, coffee wins the war. After centuries of bans, riots, royal outrage, and ridiculous experiments, one thing became clear. Coffee was unstoppable. No king, pope, or government could keep people away from their caffeine fix. Today, coffee is a global obsession, and we have centuries of defiance and rebellion to thank for it. So next time you sip your morning brew, remember, you're drinking a beverage that once made rulers shake in fear. What do you think of the war on coffee? Would you have fought for your caffeine rights? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more fascinating history from the Baron's Chest.